how do we start to think about this? How do we tee this up? I like to tee it up with a balance sheet. A balance sheet looks like this. Assets on the left, liabilities over equity on the right. And it's called a balance sheet because the two sides need to balance. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. Simple math. So let's break it apart a little bit. A lot of what we're talking about over the course of this session is going to be technical. There's a lot of jargon, not necessarily commonsensical, but I think for the average person, they have a common sense view as to what these basic components of the balance sheet are. Assets, very simply, the good stuff in the business, basically everything except the humans. So it's your cash on hand, it's your accounts receivable, but for our purposes, more importantly, it's your intellectual property. It's what really makes your business interesting and valuable. It's the good stuff. Those are the assets. What are the liabilities? That's the bad stuff. These are your debts. These are your obligations. This is what the business, this is what the company, this is what the startup owes others. It's what you have to pay the landlord. It's what you pay the bank. It's what you pay creditors. It's what you pay employees. It's what you pay contractors. It's what you pay lawyers and accountants. This is what you're obligated to pay to other people. It's the bad stuff. Okay, so assets, good stuff. Liabilities, bad stuff. We have this E down here, which refers to equity. What does that mean? How should we think about that? Well, let's play around with this equation a little bit. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. Through the magic of STEM, we can play around with our inputs, and we can show this as assets minus liabilities equals equity. Good stuff minus bad stuff equals equity. What is equity and why do we care? Equity is where the owners live. This is where the founders live. It's where the investors live who buy equity. And we're going to talk about all of these elements over the course of this session. We care about equity because this is where these people are situated and this is their opportunity to cash out. Cash out. What does that mean? Why are we referring to that? Well, you'll recall in the introduction to this episode, the notion is that we're dealing with probably tech startups, biotech startups, life sciences startups, any sort of startup that's product oriented, has technology, has intellectual property, is planning to scale and grow. These sorts of companies are not focused on profitability. They may not even be focused on revenue. And of course, that's how businesses in the United States are measured 99.99% of the time. Your ordinary Main Street businesses, your dry cleaners, your hardware stores, your hair salons, your law firms, they operate that way. And that's the way you need to operate over the long haul. But that's not what these particular companies are about, not at this stage. They're not necessarily about the long haul. They are about demonstrating to the market that they have an idea, that they can take this idea, that they can build a product around it, and that they can push this product into the market, and the market will pull it forward and pay them for it. And during that period of time, this company is probably losing money. The way they recapture that is to raise money, and we'll be talking about that. But during this period of time, they're losing money, losing money, losing money, losing money, because they're not making it, or they're making very little, certainly not enough to cover costs. And what are they trying to do? Well, it may be that the ultimate goal is to achieve the benefit for our owners through something called an initial public offering, or an IPO. And an IPO is when you register your shares to sell to the public, and it's a complicated transaction, but at 30,000 feet, it gives these owners, ultimately, at some point, the opportunity to sell their shares to the public, and it's a way they can convert their shares into cash. It's the way they make their money, okay? It's the way they realize kind of the ultimate outcome in starting this company and starting this business and converting their ownership in this company into cash. But that happens in the very rare percentage of cases. 99% of the time, the exit comes through something called M&A. M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions. These are sometimes referred to as a liquidity event. These are sometimes referred to as an exit transaction. But an M&A transaction at its highest level is as simple as this. One company shows up and says, I want to buy your startup. And they buy it. They buy it because they like the product. They buy it because they like the technology. They buy it because they like the intellectual property. They acquire the business. They buy the company. It's a highly nuanced area. There are lots of details, lots of different ways to structure these sorts of transactions. But again, at a very high level, fundamentally what's happening is our startup, this company, is taking its assets and selling them to this company that wants to buy them. It's converting the assets into cash. Sometimes those are referred to as the gross proceeds from the transaction. So we've started this business, we've started this company, we've grown it, we've had success. A company shows up on the scene and says, we want to buy your assets. Here's a check. Those are your gross proceeds. What happens next? You pay off your liabilities. So you take those gross proceeds, and you pay off the bank, and you pay off the landlord, and you pay off your employees and contractors and your accountants and lawyers and everyone else. Whatever is left, or your net proceeds, your gross proceeds, net of the liabilities, whatever is left, your net proceeds, that's what's available for the owners, the founders, the entrepreneurs who started this thing, the employees along the way who maybe got an ownership interest, investors who got an ownership interest, all of the owners of the company who live inside this equity box, who live in the equity quadrant. This is when they have their moment. This is the reckoning. This is their opportunity to convert that ownership into cash. They get to participate in the distribution of these net proceeds. It's an exciting moment. You've taken your startup, you raise money through seed deals, you probably raise money through a series of venture capital transactions, you built something of interest, something that's very exciting, something that's so interesting and so exciting that another company showed up and said, I want to give you money for that. And that company bought your assets, then you were able to take those gross proceeds, pay off your liabilities, the balance, the net proceeds are left. That's what moves to the owners.